At the end of the day, so much of frame making really is about finding room, or really, in fact, finding opportunity for human-based selling in an AI world. So how can we differentiate ourselves not just from other sellers, but how do we differentiate ourselves from AI and all the other technology that's out there today and show up and engage our customers in such a way that is truly differentiated, truly unique? It is only something that we can do as representatives of our organization, as who we are as individuals, and as human beings. And as a result, I think so much of what's in frame making, the set of lessons and ideas in frame making, turn out not only to be sales lessons or even professional lessons, they turn out to be sort of life lessons for all of us, as sort of how we interact, how we engage each other effectively and productively as human beings. Let me give you one example. It's really kind of, I think one of those like, oh, of course, but it's super interesting when you really kind of play this out practically. So to kind of get you there, just let me take you back. So let's start with sort of the middle. So a sales lesson, professional lesson, life lesson. Let's start with the professional lesson. So back in the old days at Corporate Executive Board, when I first got there as a researcher, there was two titles on the team. There was an analyst. There's more than two, but two core ones, an analyst and a consultant. And what was really interesting is the way that we judge the value, if you will, of an analyst, what got you promoted, what got you recognition, was your ability to kind of face down those really tough challenges that we saw in the research, to bring them up, to essentially play devil's advocate, to bring the team's attention to those things, the holes in the argument, the problems we might have overlooked, the things we might have sidestepped. And if you could do a really good job of, assertively, productively flagging those challenges, those problems, and playing sort of the role of skeptic or helpful skeptic, that's what made that role particularly valuable. But if you wanted to move up in the ranks to get from analyst to consultant, not only did you have to point out the problems, you also had to provide a solution. And that was one of these things you could actually see in the conversations. We had team members be really, really good at saying, well, that's not going to work, or this isn't going to work, but what would you do instead? And that's sometimes where they'd fall apart and where others would shine. Now, if we bring this into the world of sales lessons, I think that's exactly how we can show up today in an incredibly productive and differentiated ways. There's a number of ways in which your customer is going to struggle as they try to navigate a complex decision through their organization. And traditionally in sales, for many of us, and frankly, I've probably guilty of this very, very early on too, is to sort of close your eyes, cross your fingers, and hope that doesn't happen. It's like, boy, I hope procurement doesn't get involved here. I hope this doesn't go in front of that committee. I hope this one person doesn't put the kibosh on it, whatever it might be. And, in fact, there have been times early on, again, when I'd be on sales calls as sort of the subject matter expert, and there's a very distinct one I remember where we showed up to the customer organization in the rented Ford Taurus, and we're outside of the client's office, and the sales rep who was leading the call looked at me and said, no, we're going to talk to these two people today. And I got to tell you in advance, so you're not surprised, these two people, they absolutely do not agree on this one point. So whatever you do, don't bring it up. And I think one of the things I learned pretty quickly in my career is, it turns out that's probably I don't know if the very first, but very early on, that's probably the thing you want to proactively bring up and put on the table and address. Because if they can't find connection there, then everything else isn't going to work. And so this is sort of what we found, between an analyst and a consultant, of bringing up a problem versus providing a solution. This is the two things that we can do as sellers, I think, is actually identify what are those challenges, what are those problems that customers are going to face inside their own organization, whether it's stakeholder alignment, whether it's process steps, whether it's committee hearings, whether it's questions they're going to run into. Figure out what those are in advance based on what other companies have learned in similar situations, in other words, through social proof, and then proactively, productively bring those up and put those on the table and bring them to the attention of your customer, maybe before they've even thought of them themselves, because that's actually helpful. That's like a good analyst saying, here are the things I know that you love me, I love you, you see our value, we're all excited to work together. Here's where, despite the fact that you're on board, this thing could nonetheless go sideways, and proactively bring them up. But don't just sort of leave them hanging with, oh, that's a problem, I don't know how to fix it either, but good luck with that. But then let's move into the sort of the consultant world of, now, here's what we've seen for other companies of how they've addressed that challenge. In other words, we identify the problem proactively. Don't run away from it, run right at it. But then also simultaneously provide some guidance, not based on your opinion or your expertise or your experience, but provide some guidance based on social proof, because that's really what they want. How have other companies like us avoided this challenge, navigated these waters, aligned on this issue? And to the degree that you can provide that guidance, notice you've gone up a level in value. You've helped them see something they didn't see themselves on their own, a challenge, a question, an obstacle. You provided guidance and help to avoid or mitigate or address that particular challenge, and you've just made their lives that much easier, and you've made this purchase that much more likely because you've made the process that much more productive. And at the end of the day, what you find is that this is not just a sales lesson or a professional lesson. It's a life lesson. I mean, how many of us have learned in our own lives, in our personal lives, those very big, hairy, scary things that scare us? Goodness knows, we're all human. We have a tendency to want to run away from those things at different times in our lives. And virtually all of us eventually find in some point, in some way in our personal lives, that the best thing, the thing you got to do is you got to stand up and face those things down and not run away from them, but run right at them. And that's what we can do in sales. That's how you differentiate yourself, not only from other sellers, but also from technology and AIs, to show up in this very human way and be helpful. Help your customers see the things that they aren't going to see, that otherwise are going to slow them down, get them in trouble, frustrate them, and reduce their confidence. Help them identify those things. Help them address those things in a very empathetic way based on social proof and curiosity. And then you truly are valuable, because now you're not just a sales rep, you're a decision coach, and most importantly, you're a fellow human being, and that's valuable.